to join us live today, well done. That probably means that you're not interested in football or you're not interested in Celtic or Rangers. I've got two guests today. We're doing it slightly differently. I've got Danish Ashraf and I've also got Iain Sinclair, both of whom are list candidates for Central Region. Hello to both of you.
Hiya.
Hi Michelle, thanks for having us.
That's no problem. And today we're going to have quite a sort of general discussion across a wide variety of areas. And of course, we'll take questions as well. I think everybody knows the format just now once we've had a chat for a while. So I suppose first things first, I'd like to know a bit more about both of you and also let our listeners hear how did you come to be an SNP candidate? What's your background and so on? So Iain, do you want to go first?
Yeah, aye. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here. So my history in the SNP, I started kind of getting involved around about 2005. First campaign I was involved in was the 2005 general election. And pretty much at every election since then, I've just found bits and pieces to do, helped out, leafleted, so on and so forth. Worked my way up to being convener in my local branch. And have just generally tried to get involved in as much as possible where the party's concerned, because we are the party that's A, going to deliver independence, and B, we're fighting for that more progressive Scotland that we all want to see and we all want to be a part of. So yeah, effectively just put my name forward. This is the first time out at an election for me. So I put my name forward and delighted to have been elected by my peers to be on the SNP list for Central Scotland.
Brilliant. And how about you, Danish, then? What's your background in the party and how did you come to become an SNP candidate?
So my background, politically when I was younger, used to campaign for Labour, just sort of Labour family support around 9-10 years old, going up and down the tenements when I stayed in Glasgow. Always been around politics in terms of having an interest in it. At university, got really involved with a lot of charity work, children's charities abroad, fundraising here, and finding initiatives for that to be spent abroad. Following the independence referendum that I was watching closely, I thought we had it on the bag. I wasn't active around that campaign. And when I went the other way, that's when I felt actually I need to maybe, I want to do something here in Scotland for Scotland. So I felt like, you know what, I need to get into politics. I didn't see many people like myself in politics. I felt I need to put myself forward as well. So I got involved more at Branch in Cumbernauld, hence Hepburn today, and just got involved. And I ended up being asked to stand for the 2017 elections, the council elections, and got elected there. And following on from that, been involved with the group and just put myself forward for this again when it came forward, and put my election application in and things like that, and went through the process. You know, it's been a case of trying to do the work that I'm doing locally on racial equality, on Black Lives Matter locally, on diversity training that we've done in the council, on working with community groups, getting them the right funding, things like that. I lead on community empowerment at North Lanarkshire Council. I'm the press officer as well, but doing that on a wider scale at the Scottish Parliament. So just trying to fight those battles on a bigger ground, I suppose.
And so both of you then, I'm always interested in people who come to independence. I mean, I've always been an independent supporter, and I was laughing. I seem to remember I campaigned in my first general election when I was 9 years old that seemed to involve, it was the second one, second general election that year that involved marching up and down my street, blowing a mouth organ. Of course, I couldn't play. It was just a whook in and a whook out. Horrible noise, I imagine, shout and vote SNP. So it's quite unusual for you to be somebody to be involved in politics when you're so young. But I suppose, again, going back to yourself, Iain, what is it about independence that makes you kind of rocks your boat compared to, say, for example, the Labour Party that not so much now, but were previously perceived to be progressive?
I think it's, for me, it's about family more than anything else. I have two kids, My oldest will be 14 this year, which is, I know it's surprising, I don't look old enough to have a 14-year-old son, but no, I do. He's more and more becoming active and more listening to different things and questioning why. And I want to provide him with the answers to that. And realistically, we don't have the answers. We can't have the answers because we don't have the levers to pull. I want to be part of something that builds a foundation for my children, for them to be able to go on and blow us away with what they can do with the full powers of independence. It's that kind of legacy that you want to build for people, but you want to make people's lives dramatically better. And that's what pushes me towards independence.
Thank you.
Sorry.
How about yourself, Danish? What is it specifically about independence as compared to progressive policies that's brought you forward?
I think foremostly it's actually having Scotland's voice heard amongst the union. It's just not possible. And not only is it not possible, it's not what the majority partners of the union wish for Scotland. And that's become very, very apparent, especially with Boris Johnson and with decisions gone by, such as Brexit, and the arithmetic doesn't work out either with 59 Scottish MPs among 650. If we all, as a bloc, all vote together, still nothing changes, and that's just not having the Scottish people's voice heard on a political level at a time where we need it. And not only that, the status quo is no longer tenable. There's now a onslaught and an attack on devolution. So as we know, the Scottish Parliament today, as we have our devolved powers, that won't be here in 5-6 years' time if we continue on this path. And with Boris Johnson having a majority where he can speak legislation into existence with the majority that he has, we can't expect to be in this position in a short few years' time.
Yeah, I know we may well come on to that, the threats to the Scottish Parliament. So, I mean, obviously it was a big week this week with the launch of the manifesto, and I'm interested in a couple of reflections from you both. What was it in the manifesto that made you think, whoa, this is absolutely amazing? And if you hadn't already been an SNP supporter, would have fast made you become one. So, Iain, what was a couple of areas that jumped out at you then?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is that this is probably the most progressive manifesto we've ever seen in the history of the Scottish Parliament. In fact, in the history of any parliament that I'm aware of in my short time in this world, this is something that turned my head. I mean, I was watching with everybody else on Thursday as the First Minister announced the different policy areas. Couple of things, devil's in the detail though, and I like going a bit further into it. And obviously, having read the vast majority of the 70 odd pages that there are of the manifesto, it's easy to miss one or two policies out. I think the biggest one for me is probably the dental care. I think that's a real, we're heading into a real issue as well with dental care across. I mean, I think it's across the world really. So being able to provide dental care free at the point of asking is going to be a massive kind of game changer. Obviously, all the policies about doubling the child payment and things like that, I think are obviously really good. But one of it might have kind of been a fleeting glimpse, but one of the things that really kind of caught my eye was later on in the manifesto in the Scotland and the World part is the commitment to peacekeeping. I'm a big believer that Scotland can play a massive role in being able to diplomatically resolve conflict. And I think that there's a small area about the commitment to peacekeeping that we should have in Scotland, because it's one of the things Danish kind of spoke about there. Scotland's voice needs to be heard, not just in the Union, but around the world. And we need to start acting like we're a part of that world, start acting like we're independent now and have a say on these things, because he's right. Westminster are just going to ride roughshod over whatever we want, no matter what it is. So Scotland can play a role and be a leading light of hope and diplomacy in this world, and that's something that I think it badly needs.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant point, Iain, about Scotland's unique voice in the world, with the history it has, what it's contributed to the world in terms of the Enlightenment and so on. And my wee kind of research and consultancy company alongside Roger Mullen posted, in fact, a couple of book reviews of Stephen Gethin's book, Nation to Nation, in which he clearly makes that point that Scotland can have a different voice in the world. We will not make our unique voice heard through the prism of the Tories, let's face it, you know, and nor would we want to. I think that's a brilliant point, and we can do more. And of course, it strikes me that that is very helpful for the rest of the world to really start to get to know us and accept us, because we will, upon independence, and indeed before, is my view, be wanting to work very hard to build relationships around the world. How are we different? How do we want to contribute? And so the peacekeeping part of it, I quite agree. Excellent point. How about yourself, Danish? What's your reflections?
Yeah, there's, as you say, there was a lot to be proud of in that manifesto. It was really quite pleasing, you know, for us as candidates to see actually the parties really come out, something we can go out on the doorstep and really speak proudly about. I think amongst them, there was something that spoke to me personally, because it was work that I had done at North Lanarkshire Council. Being the first council, we managed to pass an anti-racist education policy at North Lanarkshire, and that was to have a review of statues, signage, names, street names, all this kind of thing. That was something that Junaid led on, and on the education side, I led on the anti-racist education part to be taught in schools. And so we actually have a working group at the minute. This was presented along with some proposals from the BAME network, the SNP affiliate group, to be put forward to the manifesto, and got picked up on. So I was absolutely and utterly over the moon about that. That was amazing to have something we worked on locally to be picked up and to be applied nationally. So it's a start, it's a step in the right direction. But I think we've got a long way to go. The practicalities of that, I feel, are such that children now being raised up within the education system, I think, need to have an honest and frank view of empire, the former British Empire, and all its warts included. And that is uncomfortable for us as Scots as well, because we disproportionately benefited from the reparations that were paid when slavery was abolished in terms of payments. So I think that's something we need to have a look at, but I think that will help tackling hatred and racism going forward, knowing that, you know what, a little humility around the empire, you know, when it comes to that. And it's not the sort of Union Jack waving, we're here and you came to us, and all sorts of, actually we're here as ethnic minorities because the empire was there, decimated economies and world powers at the time to enrich the British Union, which again maybe speaks to somewhat my support for independence and having our own voice heard. You know, still feeling as though the empire in some former ghost of its past kind of ways, still holding Scotland back in what we can achieve as a country. So that was quite big for me. The other things that I felt were fantastic was almost defence lines a little bit with regards to speaking to people who are against independence, or when we say something positive, they come back with, well, how are you going to pay for that? You only afford that because you're in the union. To be able to say we're going to freeze income tax bans and still afford to do these things shows that it's a matter of priorities, not a matter of the money not being there. And now we know that in this room, but to be able to show that at a Scottish level, that we can do free lunches, we can do free breakfast, we can do free devices for kids that need it for distance learning, and we can afford that on the current income tax bill, I think that's a big thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and funnily enough, a question about that came up on Thursday evening. We had a live stream event with Fiona Hislop, and somebody did actually ask, and she made clear that these were all costed policies, demonstrably so. I'd like to take you back and just chat a wee bit more about the history. I mean, I think it's an absolutely fair point you make. I always enjoy kind of conversing with Sir Jeff Palmer on Twitter and his perspectives. I think you're absolutely right. And it's funny from my perspective. I mean, I can only claim to be white, middle-aged, middle class, you know, and there's no secret about it. So I don't have the lived experience that you can uniquely bring, but it's so important that we recognise where we've come from. And we commented in one of these shows before that for many years, funnily enough, until the SNP came into power, we didn't even get taught any Scottish history in schools, never mind anything else. So I think it's a very valid point you make, and I think enlightenment as to how we, our forebears, benefited from other countries and their riches, and owning that and dealing with it, I just think is vital. It's only by doing that can we move forward. Now, funnily enough, in the area around kind of equalities, if you like, we've got a question here from somebody who lives in Grangemouth, David Allen. Hi, David, I hope you're well today. David's asking about commenting on supporting people with learning disabilities and autism. Now, I happen to know that David is a very active and vibrant member of the community and works with Engender. And we've previously discussed this, but do either of you have any kind of particular comment to add? And I'll give my view as well about supporting people with learning disabilities and autism.
Yeah, so in my work as an optician, which is my sort of professional work, I've done a lot of work with the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and so I've dealt with a lot of patients with learning difficulties in getting their eye testing done, taking care of their health, often where they're left by the sideline because the area is not made comfortable for them. They've not had a pre-arranged visit to make that contact known, so I'd normally book my patients in for a short visit before and have that sort of familiarity built up before the actual test, because I found that helps quite a lot. So I have some engagement on that front. With regards to supporting, I think with our autistic community, that's a community that I would really like to learn more about and see what their issues are and how I can take that forward. That's something that I need to learn more on. I need to put my hands up to that. We had Autism Awareness Week not too long ago, and I was doing some reading there. But it's definitely something that I need to learn more about, so I'd be interested in connecting with David and learning more about that.
You can do that. And now I've just realised, apologies, David, I said Engender, and of course I meant enable. How about yourself, Iain? What's your kind of, have you got any reflections on learning difficulties and autism?
Yeah, I mean, again, similar to what Danish said, I don't have a lot of experience in that area at all. And it's something that, yeah, I need to put my hands up and learn more about. What I've picked up on what we've said as a party over the past kind of couple of days, though, I was really encouraged to see that we're going to be bringing in a learning disabilities, autism and neurodiversity commissioner. Mm-hmm. So I think the work that person's going to do, whomever that may be, and the team they lead, will see, not a revolution, but see improvements made in the way that community lives better. And I think it's all about making lives better. That's the goal. Having read a couple of things and knowing a few people on kind of social media, I also know that there's a real disparity in the way neurodiversity is seen in the world. And I think we need to be better at bringing people into the world. A lot of that comes down to diagnosis, and I know that there is a way, and I think it particularly affects female neurodiverse people. In the way that females are diagnosed, it can get missed quite early on, and they have to be, they're diagnosed later on in life. So having gone through a very frustrating life up until a point, and then they're diagnosed in later years, they go, I've missed out on so much that I could have done. We need to get better at that. And I think through this commissioner and through the team, I think we're going to get better on that. So David, if you're listening, and I know David quite well, so I'm really glad for that question, David, and I really hope you're doing okay.
Yeah, no, and again, I mean, I have a family member who certainly had struggled with learning difficulties as a youngster in school, and I know how it affected the family and the lack of education. And it was education for my parents at that time. They struggled to deal with that, and they didn't understand where there was frustration, that was the rationale for it. So it really was clearly for me about understanding and education. And it's a really interesting point you make, Iain, about neurodiversity and how that can manifest differently between female brains and male brains. And also, I think I know the report you were referring to, where for many years data just wasn't gathered that disaggregated in that way between males and females. And then when they did start to do that, they discovered it was actually different. So again, education and learning, I think we all have something to learn. Yes, so indeed, thanks for that question, David. Now, we'll just go on to another one before we come back to you guys again. We've got a question here. I mean, I heard Anna Sarwar on the radio this morning being interviewed by Martin Geisler. And this is about the Labour Party. At the moment, my understanding is the stance he's taking is he's against independence altogether and against any further discussion of it. And maybe at some point down the road when he imagines, I think, that we've all forgotten about it. But that's not easy for me to say. Do we think Anna Sarwar's out of touch? Do we think this is just a clever political ploy? But what does it really mean for the Labour Party in Scotland, of which I know many people who are independent supporters? So what do you think about that, Danish, then? What's your perception on where the Labour Party in Scotland are?
Yeah, I think the Labour Party are, I've seen the numbers, and I think Anna is doing a good job for Labour with regards to being someone who's at least coherent in the message that they're trying to put out, you know, contrasting that with what they've had before. I think Labour are looking like they're quite happy with that. Is he out of touch? I think he needs to re-listen to the will of the Scottish people. He's not addressing that. There's 30% of the Labour membership that is wanting a referendum, and at least, I mean, they could describe themselves as Democrats because they're wanting to go with what every opinion poll is showing around, that at least 50%. If you go with the more pessimistic ones, want a referendum, and that's a democratic right and will that needs to be respected. And I think just on the basis of democracy, you need to acknowledge that. For him to ignore that, I think, is actually showing us in the SNP why it's only the SNP that are going to bring this about. Because if you're part of Labour, if you're part of any other group, they can't bring it about the way the SNP can, which is why we're seeing both full sets of SNP. We're the only party that can bring this to the fore. And not only that, it's not just a shallow argument, it's the record of governance that we've shown in this country to show how independent Scotland would be governed by competent, professional, forward-looking, outward-looking people. And I think that is a bigger argument for independence than anything else. Then, you know, just to show that the SNP, what we can do with the leaves of power that we would have in an independent Scotland. Yeah,
and how about yourself, Iain? Do you think he's out of touch?
Democracy is a funny old thing, isn't it? I think the issue is that there's no one person that has the right to tell anybody that they can't vote for or against something. If everybody is saying we want to vote on this, it's not necessarily that we want to vote for or against. We just want the opportunity to vote. And taking that away from someone, there's trouble brewing if you're actively trying to take something away from someone. You see the issues that they're having in America with voter suppression and not allowing people to vote on the issues, and they're very big issues across there. This is the same thing across here. It's this argument of once in a generation that keeps getting thrown towards us. It's like, I mean, come on, folks, so much has changed between that point and this point that we have to do something about it. Is Annas out of touch? He's probably out of touch with his own supporters in that way, and that if they're telling him they want to vote, and I think his own party at one point said that we want to have a vote at some point, but UK Labour said no. There's the eternal paradox of Scotland right there, folks. You heard it here first.
Succinctly put, Iain, I must say. So I think in summary then, it's bigger than just the democracy argument about the right to make our voices heard. I've already touched on the number of Labour supporters who are also independent supporters. So they're also being ignored. as well as the Democrats. Now, they say in politics, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake, but I would gently suggest to the Labour Party in Scotland that until they make up their mind, are they for people in Scotland? Are they for the working people of Scotland? Or will they favour the baubles of Westminster over and over again, as they did in the independence referendum? Until they can clearly define that, they will always struggle. And that comes down to independence. And I noticed, I mean, of course, I made a comment in one of the videos I've done that it's another area the Labour Party have simply rolled over. Indeed, I've had all the unionist parties and said, don't worry your pretty little heads about the impact on your children's future and Scotland's GDP of Brexit. We've been told just to roll over and away you go. And I just don't think that they're going to get away with that. And until they sort the issue, do they stand up for the working people in Scotland? Yes or no, they're going to struggle. And it has to, I have to say, the answer is no at the moment. Right, okay, so now let's talk about the list. So you're both list candidates. How are you, or are you indeed at all, campaigning differently as a list candidate than if you imagined you were a constituency candidate? What's your thoughts on that? So Danish, you go first then.
So I think this campaign has been different for a number of reasons, especially with regards to COVID. You know, a lot more has been online, a lot more has been these type of discussions and hustings. So obviously being a constituency candidate would confer different. I think there's a bit more structure to it. There's a bit more what needs done in this area, and you can actually track the progress in terms of your activate lists and hitting the doors and getting your data updated and acting on it. Whereas across a region, you know, not least which branches that obviously are focusing on their own campaigns locally to try and dot around them and make your way around is a little bit difficult. And when people are focused on the local message, for me myself, it's a matter of getting around and trying to make it along to everyone's campaigns. I'm saying the same to yourself, Michelle. We arranged time for me to come down and join in and chat some doors in your area and show that support from the list side as well, over and above the local message as well. So it's really been trying to get I think the thing that the advantage that we have is that we are not tied to one constituency, so we can focus on sometimes the hustings of things and push the SNP message in a way maybe the local candidates aren't able to do, because you really are very busy with the local, and as you should be, with the local message.
Mm-hmm. And how about yourself then, Iain? How are you campaigning differently?
I think for me, and probably for Danish as well, and every list candidate up and down the country, it's more to do with how the team works. I think that there's more that we can achieve together as a team of SNP candidates across a bigger area than we could ever think about doing individually in a very small area. But I think for me, it's online more than anything. I'm an old school campaigner. I like getting around the doors. I like seeing the whites of people's eyes and knowing that they've told me that they're not going to vote for me, and I can respect that and say thanks very much, enjoy your day. But equally, I like the buzz of a campaign as well. There's not that buzz, it's not that same buzz. There is a different buzz because it is still exciting, but the thriving campaign, the jump and shout, the high visibility stuff is really quite low key, because understandably safety is paramount at the moment. We're not out of the woods yet. We have to do things safely. But I long for the days, I can't wait for the days that we can get back to meeting in a place and then go out and knock the doors and spread our positive vision for Scotland on the doorsteps again. So yeah, for me, online is key. The messages that we're putting out, sharing everything that we can. Michelle, your campaign at the moment is one of the hottest online campaigns I think we've got going in the country. So yes, that's how I'd like to think that we're doing things differently. We're focusing more on the online stuff, getting that message out there.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And of course, although I'm a constituency candidate, I think we've all shared frustrations that we can't do things in the normal way. But I take the view that every set of circumstances, the only way you can deal with it is to look for the positive and look for the opportunity, because if you don't do that, well, we could all just, you know, kind of give up and go home. And so, yeah, I have been very active online, and I see that as something that will continue regardless of any other future campaigns of other people, in addition to getting out there and meeting people. So in actual fact, imagine if things had opened up again as they have done now, obviously it's still limited by the rules, and quite rightly so, but if they had have done weeks ago, I would have had to keep the online thing going and doing all the getting out and about and meeting people, which I think we all agree is fantastic. You can't beat the whites of the eyes right enough, Iain, you know. So, oh, and we've got a question here from Raymond Young, who's another fairly regular listener. Hope you're well today, Raymond. He says, I help out at the local food bank. How would you close the attainment gap and end poverty? Now, I think the manifesto's already given us some guidance in that, but again, I'd appreciate both your thoughts, Danish and Iain. If you go first, Danish.
Thanks for getting in touch with this, Raymond. Poverty is actually something that's quite close to my heart. I mentioned at the start of this, I worked on children's charities for about 8 years or so before coming into politics, and I think the approach that the party's taking, the multifaceted approach that the party is taking, is the way to do it, because the things that we look for in tackling poverty, which is a complex issue, is multifaceted. You know, we have to look at the backgrounds of children, what their issues are they in terms of the specifically around the attainment gap. So are they being fed? Are they being able to get clothed? We've got the uniform grant that's gone up. We've got the child poverty payment that's been introduced and then been doubled if the SNP is re-elected to form government. We've got free childcare, which can impact the incomes of homes, especially single parent homes, which again, childcare disproportionately still falls on women. You know, so these are all things that are in different ways being attributed, being put out and can contribute to poverty. I think we need to steer clear of getting into the specific strands of poverty and look at it in a holistic sense. So what I mean by that is just looking at fuel poverty, or just looking at you know, heating poverty or food poverty. They all stem from poverty, and we need to take a holistic approach to what is a complex and multifaceted issue. And I think the party's going about it in the right way. I think it's wonderful that you help out at the local food bank. It's something that needed a lot more help. COVID has showed up the cracks in our societies and in our communities like nothing else. And I think if this isn't a wake-up call to Tory austerity and Tory ideology for Scotland and a plan for anyone that isn't from their ilk, then I think a few other things are going to show us that we need independence to deal with these issues.
And how about yourself then, Iain? What do you want to add to that?
Yes, it's a great question. And, you know, food banks in areas down Scotland, they do amazing work, fantastic work. But reliance on food banks and charities is an absolute symptom that our national government, where the levers of power sit, has failed. They continue to fail. Now in Scotland, we have a little bit of power to be able to tinker around the edges here, but we can't do the same as what we would want to do without the powers to do it. I live in an area that is quite high poverty. The school that both of my kids attend and have attended is one of the schools that's in Scotland's SIMD and receives attainment funding, and was one of the first schools to receive attainment funding. And I see hungry kids going to school, and hungry kids don't learn. And this is the problem, is that we have to take a step back and go, right, what causes poverty? I'll talk personally for a second. We were close to that as a family a few years ago, because I lost my job. And I think this is one of the big things, is that it can be a big hit, and all of a sudden everything goes. The carpet is dragged from underneath your feet, or you can have been part of a system that has failed you for so long. Danish is right. We need to take a holistic approach to this, because it's not just one thing that hits hard. It's a multitude of things, and you know, we need to just get back to basics. What do people need? What do people need? People need food. People need warm homes, and people need to be able to have the security of a wage coming in every month. Looking at the universal basic income, for example, is one way that we can achieve, you know, parity and equity and start to lift people out of poverty. If you look at child poverty in particular, I mentioned it earlier on, the doubling of the child payment. I mean, it's already been called game changing. If we're going to double it, let's go for it. You know, we need to do whatever we can, whatever it takes, to be able to give our kids the best start in life, and to be able to have a society that doesn't bear kids into an impoverished family. We need to do whatever we can. So the manifesto commitments that we've come up with so far are really great, and we can always do more. But you know, this is a start. This is a start. But the ultimate goal is, I'll come back to it again every time, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, independence is the only way that we can dramatically and radically change things.
Yeah, and dramatically and radically. I mean, in some respects, we want to be able to do things that are revolutionary. I was so pleased to see the minimum income guarantee in the manifesto. And that, I mean, there's a variety of ways that, you know, some people would say, oh, well, we need universal basic income. There's lots of different kind of variants, but some attempt to have a minimum income, because people can breathe a little, they can plan a little, they can manage their income and expenditure with that. And to be able to do that universally, I think, would be utterly, completely and utterly game changing. I find it completely and utterly shameful that we have children who go hungry and parents who have to suffer the indignity and shame of not being able to provide for their children. Nothing makes me more angry about the situation we're in as a society. So I would say to anyone who is listening, who may have thought about some of the other political parties, that singularly Westminster retains the final control over these game-changing measures. And it's the powers that come with any normal state of independence. We want to do so much more, but a very, very good start in the manifesto with the doubling of the child payment. And as you mentioned, Danish, with the wraparound care, and of course the free breakfast and free lunch for kids all year round, not just in summertime. I think that's been quoted by the Labour Party, all year round breakfast and lunchtime. So it's something I think we all feel strongly about. Now, as is traditional in these, we allow the talkers a wee break by me showing a wee kind of campaign video. I've done a variety of them, and I'm very sorry to say, Danish, it doesn't feature any rabbits. It doesn't even feature my dog that does, I think I'll need to do another one to introduce him as well. He's a fairly permanent feature, but we'll just take a minute to watch my campaigning video, and then we'll get back in the chat again. My name is Michelle Thomson. I'm your SNP candidate for Falkirk East. This forthcoming election for Holyrood 2021 is the most important in my lifetime. Scotland stands on the cusp of change. Without change, and without the powers to make the changes we want to see, Scotland will be held back. We've been forcibly removed from the EU against our wishes. The COVID pandemic has exposed the cruel heartlessness of Westminster. The Tories knowingly and deliberately work against the interests of Scotland, whilst the Scottish branch office of the Labour Party will once again side with the Tories to stop Scotland's voice being heard. So this election is about choices, Scotland's choices. Choose the strongest candidate who will put Falkirk East on the map. Choose a candidate with a strong track record in speaking up for people who cannot speak up for themselves. Choose a candidate with a breadth of life, business and political experience. Choose a candidate who will focus on making things better, greener and more sustainable for you and your family. Choose self-determination. It's Scotland's future and it's Scotland's choice. Make that choice Michelle Thomson for Falkirk East. There we go. No rabbits. Definitely next time there will be rabbits, that's for sure. So I'm just scrolling down the list of questions here. It's reverted. Lucy Noble's commenting. Thank you, Lucy. Our future is our children. I agree wholeheartedly with you. Now, I'm going to introduce something slightly contentious. Nobody else has yet, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. There's been a lot of chat, hasn't there, about what people should do with their list vote. And we know that there's a number of different parties. So I'm just going to take the bull by the horns and ask, what are both of your reflections about why people should vote both votes SNP and not both votes something else? So I'm going to turn it around this time. I'm going to go for Iain first, just to keep everyone on their toes. So what do you think, Iain?
It beats me that anybody's going to vote anything other than both votes SNP if they're an independent supporter on May the 6th or with their postal vote. And I'm very, very aware, because I'm a postal voter myself, that the postal votes dropped through the door just the other day. Why does it beat me? Because the SNP are the only vehicle to independence, the only vehicle with the confidence, the vision and the policies to get us there. We've done an epic job. As, you know, in my very biased, I'll admit that, very biased opinion, we've done a really good job in what we've done since coming to office in 2007. But you know what? We are the party of independence. We always have been. And if anybody was to, and we can't meet on the doorsteps, and I understand that, but if anybody was to come, and this is one of the things that's really grated on me as well, is that people who have questioned the idea that the SNP don't really want independence, I'll tell you what, see if I could get 5 minutes of a conversation with you, you would never in a million years question my commitment to our independence. And this is what it really boils down to, because questioning that commitment for me is a real personal slight on the fact that you're questioning my commitment to my kids' futures. And I'm not going to have that. It's quite simple. Independence is the only way that we can make a real difference. And I'm 100% fully committed to that. And if anybody's got any other questions, feel free to contact me. My email address is for this campaign is absolutely public. I'm more than happy to sit down and pen an email back to you or schedule in a phone call. But having both votes SNP in the way that we took North East Scotland in 2011 completely and added an additional member seat on at the back of that on the list, we can get people like Danish, like you, Michelle, like myself, like other colleagues up and down the country who are fully committed and devoted to independence for Scotland in our parliament. Get that independence referendum and then build a government that's going to take us forward. That's that.
Well, an impassioned answer there. And how about yourself, Danish? I'm sure you must have been asked this, or it's come across your timeline quite a lot as well. How are you responding to this discussion at the moment?
I think you're right, it comes up a lot, and I think you've done the right thing by bringing it up and grabbing the bull by the horns. I'm going to continue to take the bull by the horns and say, look, there is a lot of discussion around this region and that region, and the numbers, and do they add up, and a lot of accusations of the SNP are being disingenuous, which is just a lot of nonsense. We have one national message for both votes SNP. If our support, who give us their vote on the first vote, on the constituency vote rather, all voted SNP on the list vote, we would out and out have an SNP majority. It is as plain and simple as that. There's a lot of chat of quote unquote wasted votes. I don't think any of them are wasted, because we cannot and we will not take the electorate for granted. This is the mistake that Labour made. It showed complacency in their policy, complacency in their in their demeanour as a party and as individuals, because they knew they would get re-elected, or they thought they would. And when things turned for them, Scotland has not forgotten that. Scotland really hasn't forgotten that. So I think we need to recognise that this is a national message, and that everyone needs to stick to the both votes SNP for that majority SNP government, and see us bring about an independent Scotland. With regards to some of the arguments that are put forth for it in this region and that region, the reason we have a national message is that you need to put out, as we in the political bubble may understand that intellectually, we may accept that, but the fact of the matter is, this is a national message for every voter, big and small, interested and not, folk that show up on the day and folk that read everything online as it goes along, who are on these Twitter spats. There can only be one overarching message. And also you see the sort of off-brand cola messaging from the Labour about both votes Labour and both votes yes. It shows how strong the messaging is, that we have other people taking it and trying to co-opt the messaging from the SNP. We need to stay united on this front to get Scotland to be an independent country, so we can realise all the ambitions that we have for our country.
Yeah, and again, there's lots and lots of arguments people put across. The concern I have is the uncertainty and complexity around it. The idea of being able to game it with a list system just seems to me to be naive, and people will point to, oh, but look what happened last time, so therefore that'll happen this time. But actually, it's extraordinarily difficult to do that. And the other thing I would add is this concept of a supermajority. We don't need a supermajority. We need a majority. A majority is 50% plus one. So in some respects, I worry a great deal that we're playing into our opponents' hands by seeking a supermajority. We don't need a supermajority. We need a majority. And I think that's just a bit of kind of wordsmithing in some respects. I think you were going to add something else there, Danish, is it?
Yeah, I don't want to get too into, because I will end up just ranting a bit, but there's so much information out there. I'm glad you brought up supermajority. It's a bit of political engineering that's taking place. I don't even use that word in my tweets to talk against it, because it plays into the hands of those that are trying to divide the yes vote, the SNP vote. As you see, it takes over our language without us even realising it. Now, supermajority in the States actually has a legislated level of usefulness. We don't have that in this country. A majority is a majority, as you mentioned, 50% plus one, that's all you need. We don't have that at the minute with the Greens, because the same people who advocated for the things that they're advocating for now did it then, and we lost that majority. We had it prior to that when we called the independence referendum. So it is a little bit bonkers to continue to advocate for the same thing and expect a different result. And with regards to people saying, how likely is it in certain regions? It's a national message, number one. Secondly, the SNP, the most popular party, the party of governance, the party in the forefront of the independence movement, the reason that we're talking about independence today, are able to talk about it as a political reality and not just a political fantasy, is because the SNP. We cannot forget that. And that party needs an additional 3, 4, 5, 6% on the list vote. That is what we're needing. These new parties that are coming out the woodwork, that are creating things for themselves, that are full of people, frankly, that didn't even get through vetting on the SNP and have joined these other parties to try and find a place for themselves. I think we need to question their ambitions and question their own reason for getting, I've said enough, but getting involved in these parties where they have a stance to speak about matters or speak about give their opinion on things which they felt, the thing is, as the sitting party, we give oxygen to these other parties by speaking about them. So I try to refrain from getting into it too often. And you'll see on my Twitter line, I don't do it. But I think what I've said, what I needed to say. I think it needs to be both votes SNP, and it'll work for us because it has worked for us in the past. And that's the proof of the pudding. Oh, sorry, one last thing. Sorry, Iain, I think Ian's trying to come in. Just on because people like to get into the numbers of these things. I want to address that because it sounds like we get a bit woolly about it, but I'll get down to brass tacks about it. You need to be breaching the 5% mark. And for a lot of these parties, they won't do that. They won't do it across the region. The Scottish voter is very savvy, and they're particularly, how to say, cautious around new parties on the list. And even the Greens averaged 6.6% across Scotland. The established Greens, led by Patrick Harvey and Lawrence Slater at the time, only got 6.6% across the piece, across all of Scotland. How we expect these other parties to breach that 5% and get even one MSP in some of these regions, I don't know. Now, they may well do that, and that's up to the democratic will of Scotland and the voters, but the numbers that they're putting out, well, if we only took half of the SNP votes off these wasted votes, we would get X many MSPs. Who's to say that you would pick up half of those votes?
Well, that's what I mean about complexity. So, Iain, were you going to add something else before we move on?
Yeah, just I'll try and keep it very, very brief. I mean, Danish has pretty much nailed it on the head, every point that he's made there. We have to also understand that complacency is not in our vocabulary here. Complacency is what lost us 3 seats in the Lothians the last time, because everybody thought, oh, it's great, you know, we're going to do everything on the constituency seats, that'll be fine. We lost 3 seats to constituencies, and we didn't pick up as many as we should have done on the list seat because people didn't vote on the list for the SNP. No, let me tell you, as much as everybody likes to see these polls and everything that's going on nationally, no seat in any constituency, no candidate, doesn't matter if he's been in the seat for 20 years or just coming in as a fresh candidate out the pack, nothing is guaranteed. And that's the thing. Democracy, as I said earlier on, it's a funny old thing. And the other thing we forget often is that as we live in a political bubble, the vast majority of Scotland's voters don't live in the Twitter sphere. They're no caring.
It's probably a much happier place to be, I think.
Exactly, but they're no caring about what's going on Twitter and who said what to who. What they're caring about is, how does this affect me? I mean, I very much go to the example of my mum votes with what's best, effectively, and that's what she keeps telling me. I'll vote with who I think will do the best job. And we've proven that we're doing the best job that we can. So why wouldn't you vote for us?
Mm-hmm. I know, and I suppose wrapping it up about, I always like to try and think about, well, why should we care? And there's 2 points that I've made consistently throughout my campaign. One, that it's a value thing for me to be seen to be working as hard as I possibly can throughout the entire campaign, the same as the sort of selection process I went through, because it's the right thing to do, because arrogance and complacency towards anybody, I just have no truck with. I just don't agree with it. And the other thing that comes through so strongly to me, and I have evidence and have seen that, is how hard our SNP members work. I mean, I remember being in Westminster, it was commented by all the other parties in some respects. They were a bit irked because they were in a kind of pact where we'll all do nothingness together. And they were quite irked at the SNP MPs and how hard they worked. And I just think that we have to continually and consistently prove that we are the best, you know, in terms of our work rate. So there's something that sits above all of that. Right, okay, well, time is moving on. We've got sort of 5 minutes left or so. I told you the time would fly. There's so much to discuss. Just a wee bit then to kind of finish up. Now, we've talked about the context of the kind of list seat, but in terms of your sort of local area, and I know you're both standing for the list, but your kind of local area, what do you see are the immediate challenges? So in other words, if you wanted to try and, you know, assuming you're successful, and I hope you both are, if you wanted to promote a policy, what do you think it would be for your local area? So you've both got a couple of minutes on that. Going with yourself first, Danish.
Thanks, Patricia. No, I won't seek to speak for our local candidate, Jamie Hepburn. He's an incredible candidate, and I think he has our full support for the local area. In terms of what I've come across in my council role, I suppose I can speak to that and what maybe needs done. As a prospective MSP candidate for this region, connectivity is a big deal. I think we now in the Scottish Parliament have the legislation in the Transport Act to now start working on proper connectivity for public transport. And that speaks to some of the issues that we've spoken about already with regards to poverty. I think it helps self-esteem. If you can show up for a job on time because you've got the connectivity between towns, out with the cities, we're still very city-centric with our public transport. And I'm a driver myself, but I see it, and my constituents speak to me about it all the time with regards to connectivity. I personally drive a lot just by the nature of my work, but to have our connectivity still quite city-centric, it means that we can't easily get from, say, in Cumbernauld to Ravenscraig, even where the vaccines were going to take place. We had to fight to have the health centre kept open, the vaccination centre kept open in Cumbernauld, because it was going to take a couple of hours just to get up the road, which is a 30-minute drive. It certainly shouldn't be that way. And this leads back to private companies running a lot of the routes and taking just the profitable routes and running them on the basis of profit and not on the basis of what's best for the public service. Now, there's nothing wrong with making profit from those routes. There's nothing wrong with being in business and running on a basis of what's best for your business, but it's also a public service. And I think that needs to take a greater account when we look at that. So public transport for me is a big one for our central region.
Mm-hmm. And how about yourself, Iain?
Yeah, I would echo those thoughts. I mean, for one, I'm kind of glad that local authorities are going to be able to actually have bus services, bus companies themselves going forward through the Transport Act. So that's one thing. That also kind of ties in with what I think is particularly, because I'm in Falkirk district, obviously, and Falkirk district has, well, Grangemouth has 83% of the Chemical Industry Association registered companies on their doorstep. So environment is a huge, huge point for me, for this area. Also, kind of across the central region, the fact that the fracking can't take place in central Scotland now, which is where the vast majority of the licences are, is a big, big step. I'd love to see more radical kind of proposals come forward for that. And I know that we're taking first steps for hydrogen and things like that. In terms of what I see locally, and I'm talking really, really locally because I'm literally talking within my own kind of few streets here, I'd like to take forward a bit more on alleviating poverty and taking that forward as well. I know that here in Falkirk, we've got Falkirk Council do a great job with some of their schemes and things like that, especially in terms of just assisting people. I think it's just about helping people to get to what they want to be. As we have a great candidate here in Falkirk West with Michael Matheson, and obviously yourself in Falkirk East, and previously Angus MacDonald, who is the MSP for Falkirk East until the election. We've got great people here who want to help their local communities and want to take things forward. And I think so much as that competence is there to be able to do something, we still have to keep coming back to the fact that as much as we can do here locally, we can't do the big stuff that's going to make a real big difference, because we just don't have the capacity or the powers to do so. Yeah. And we need them. We need them more than ever.
Yeah, we would all agree on that. And I suppose it occurs to me that it's unusual that we've spent an hour without talking about what I regard as a kind of burning issue of the day, which is climate change and decarbonisation. It's just been the way our conversational flow's gone. But obviously, you mentioned Grangemouth, Iain, and as well as decarbonisation. I mean, I was looking the other day at the Grangemouth Future Industry Board that is now up and running, and you can view the minutes of that and who's attending and so on online. And I did that myself, and it's great to see that up and running. And one side is decarbonisation, but also the clear manifesto commitments around putting Scotland at the forefront of a green revolution in terms of being up at the top of the chain in terms of development. Hydrogen was mentioned, for example, in the manifesto, and putting ourselves at the forefront of that as well. And really leading on that change, both reactively and proactively, to position ourselves to take advantage of that. I mean, those of us who've grown up through an SNP hinterland have been used to being told, I remember being told when I was in primary school that the oil would run out. Now, in actual fact, of course, the oil's not run out, but we are making positive choices about how we use fossil fuels going forward. But guess what? The good news for Scotland, it doesn't always feel like that. The waves are going to keep coming in, it's going to keep on being windy, and it's going to keep on raining, and all these sources of power that we have as a climate are going to stand us in good stead, plus excellent universities, excellent skills that we have in our scientific and intellectual and technology community. So that probably winds it up there. Now, I will be announcing the special guest we've got on Thursday, just once I've confirmed with this person, but I have to tell you, it's going to be pretty good. We're upping the ante every single time. And next Sunday, we have local councillors who are going to be attending from across Falkirk East. And that's going to give a really, really good reflection of what is the same across the constituency and what is different. So I'll be putting that out on Facebook as well. And it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to you both, to Danish Ashraf and to Iain Sinclair, both of whom are truly excellent list candidates for Central Region. So make sure if you want to see both these guys represented, it's both votes SNP. Okay.
Thanks for having us, Michelle. Great discussion.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you
it's been
then.
great. Thank you.
Cheers. See you then both. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.